So this is the
Okay,
first
sir.
time I'm using it.
Right.
And I can't see myself on the screen. I wanted to check whether the brightness is okay, whether you can see me properly.
So you can just you are properly visible to us.
Hmm.
Yes,
Is it
now you're
not?
visible. Yes, sir. Now it is better, sir.
It's better. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll just put on some more light. Let me see if that helps. Is that still better?
Yes, sir. Better,
Oh,
sir. We can see you, sir.
okay, wonderful.
So once you finish with your deliberation, then we'll be taking your questions from the participants. They can send those questions through the chat box to us, and I'll put forward those questions to you.
Okay, great. So, whom am I addressing? What is the kind of profile of people? I mean, these are students or these are practicing professionals who have taken up this certification, want to take up this certification on global human resources. What is the kind of people I'm addressing is what I would like to know. So, how many
Right.
participants to start with?
So we have around 51 participants.
51 participants.
Yeah.
So,
And
if,
sir, yeah.
if you could give me, see, getting everybody's introduction would be a little time consuming, because even if one takes half a minute, then we've lost about 25 minutes in the process, correct?
Right, sir. Sir, we are having participants from, starting from research scholar, PG students, and executives from different industries also. So we have a combination of all.
How many of them are experienced and they are dealing with compensation?
Sir, around 20-25 people we have executives, I believe, and a few are students, and most of them are research scholars also.
Okay, fine. Fine. So the subject is compensation and benefits. Okay, that's the
Right,
subject
sir.
on which I need to talk. Right.
Right.
Okay, great. So is
So
this
you can yes, sir.
is this interactive?
Yes, sir. You can interact. You can also ask them some questions if you wish to. They can unmute themselves and interact with you.
Okay. So if somebody can tell me the sessions that have already been taken, which are the sessions that have been taken?
So business architecture we have covered one, HR architecture the first class. Then we had covered yesterday motivation, and we have covered talent management.
I see. Okay. Now I also want to understand what is the expectation. What do you want me to cover over this period? I mean, any questions that is there in the minds of participants? This is what I want to understand about compensation, or I have this anxiety about this subject. I want to know, particularly something which comes to their mind about compensation and benefit that I should address.
So in the
Anyway,
beginning,
leaving it to all, I would want participants to give me at least one line in terms of their expectation at the end of this session.
right, sir. So should I request any one of them to share
So
their
all,
expectations?
yeah, one by one, all those who would want to, say something in
Right,
terms
sir.
of expectation, let's get to hear them.
Okay, sir. I request the participants to please unmute themselves. Anybody, any one of you, or who wants to share their expectations with sir, please. Anyone, please.
Yeah, just give me your name. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
go
We have
ahead.
Lopamudra.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah.
And good afternoon.
Hi, Lupa. Yeah, hi.
Sir, I
So, Lupa.
have always, yes, am I audible, sir?
Yes, very audible, very much.
Thank you. I have always challenged us to measuring performance-linked compensation. And most of the time what happens is when we hire new professionals, new talent, most of the time we get someone who is already drawing higher than the existing salary, what we are offering currently.
Okay.
So that is a challenge to bring new talent with a higher package. So how to
I get it.
manage
I get it. So you're saying getting new talent
yes.
at higher price. Generally, it will be at a higher price than the one who had left you. Correct?
Yes. Yes, that's the one left us. Maybe already existing people working on the same profile with a lower package.
So the equity is getting lost.
Right.
The organization equity that you maintain and would like to maintain is getting lost, correct? And how?
And sometimes it also happens when we hire someone with some amount of package. After that, we find he is competent enough, and we try to take him to the level. And in that case is also inequality bread for which we cannot manage the compensation.
Yeah, fine, Lopa. I think very, very relevant question you've asked. This is a practical problem that all of us face in our HR function. Forget comp and benefit, but even in HR, those who are recruiting face this problem. The HR guys are constantly dealing with this kind of a situation when we are getting a person who comes at a level higher or at a salary higher than those who have been in the system, and we get to hear from the background that is this the price of staying back in a company? So I understand what you're saying. So we'll try and deal with this. So Lopa, are you working? Do you work?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I am working.
Where are you?
Currently, I'm based in Ludhiana, and I'm working with Navayug Enterprises. And we are a manufacturer of cycle parts, and we are supplying complete bicycle to Decathlon.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. Good question. I've noted the questions. We'll definitely try and touch upon them. Very practical questions. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. My pleasure.
Anybody else? Quickly,
Hello,
anybody?
sir.
Any questions? No, nobody else. 51
Hi,
people.
sir.
Yeah.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. Hello, sir. Very good afternoon. Sir, actually, I wanted to know, like we have this topic today. So, how on what basis we have the salary structuring when a employee joins or he through his career he gets promoted, the benefits that are attached on basis which it is segregated, the negotiation done, the package finalization, the percentage division in terms of bonus and the company contribution, employee contribution. At the end of the year, it becomes a PLI kind of thing, annual appraisal, along with the onboarding and retention, sir. Also, it differs. So, to keep back the employee, or but yes, sir. So basically, these stages of compensation or benefits, you can say.
Right. What's your good name?
Sir, Soumyashri Mohanty.
Someshri. You're working, Someshri?
Yes, sir. I am working, sir.
So, Someshri, I am taking this as two questions.
Okay.
What is the basis of a salary structure or salary range, if I may say?
Right.
So salary structure is to do with the design of the structure, whereas salary range is what level needs what kind of a salary. So there are always salary bands and salary ranges.
Yes,
so your
sir.
question is, how does one design a salary range, or how does one create a salary range in a system
Right, sir.
or in an organization? And the other one is a design concept. What should be basic and what should be other components? What is taxable? What is not taxable? What are perks,
Yes.
values of perks, and so forth.
Yes,
Okay?
sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
So I'm
sir.
taking it only to. I'm not taking onboarding and other stuff because
Yes, sir.
that's to do
Sure, sir.
with other functions. Yeah, we'll
Yes,
limit
sir.
ourselves to the
Yes, sir, sure. So
Correct?
that actually quite interests me, because as an employee also and as a student, executive student of HR also, to how these things are, like I would like to know all of this. Would be great,
Yes,
sir.
yes.
Yeah.
No,
Thank you.
I'll try and cover that. I'll give you some overall idea, at least a fundamental idea of how this is done. This is a subject which is more arty than though it's a combination of art and science, but it still has a bit of art in it. But I'll try and give you the maths behind all this so that it helps you develop it further from there.
Great, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Someshri, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Kaustubh Agarwal here.
Yeah, Mr. Kaustubh.
I want to know a few details about, for an example, if we are bringing a subject matter expert from outside of India to the India, maybe in any function of an organization. So what kind of benefits do we need to offer to such people? Number one.
Expat. You're talking about expat salary, correct?
Yes, expat salary. So those who are coming from abroad to India, and vis-a-vis those from India whom we are placing abroad on the same organizational extensions. So what would be the difference of benefits which will occur from while the person was posted here in India and when he's being sent abroad from India? So are there some standard practices and maybe details of those of?
Sure.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure. This is a very technical question, and this is also a question that depends upon the philosophy and approach that organizations have. So there is a technical side and the science to this whole thing. At the same time, each company has its own practice and its own philosophy of how they want to treat different people within the same institution, but sitting in different parts of the country. So there is an element of what we call pay parity in the country versus pay parity across various other entities that they have in the globe.
Right.
And then the cost of living. So how much do you save and how much money do you make? All these factors are put together to arrive at it.
Okay.
And not one works. Yeah?
Right.
But we will talk about it. It's an interesting subject. We will certainly talk about it.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure, Kasturi. Anybody else, friend?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, actually my first question is, how compensation help to retain an employee in an organization?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Yes, sir.
Certainly it helps. It is something that is part of my discussion. So one of the USPs as we start on compensation is that one big element or big stickiness that compensation can bring, irrespective, is that it favors retention. It may not necessarily always help you with great performance and other things that you want in the organization, but it creates some stickiness irrespective. So compensation is a very important strategic tool an organization has to be able to retain people in the system. So it's not that compensation is good and hence employee will always stay. There are many other factors an employee leave the organization. But as I've already said, if the compensation is good, then so much more resistance from leaving the system. So it definitely is a retention tool, if nothing. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this is one of the starting points of compensation, basically. So that is why compensation is supposed to be better, supposed to be good, because if other things are not good, still people will strive and be with you. I think I've already answered your question. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure. What's your name?
Sir, this is Rupali Paikrai, sir.
Rupali.
Yes, sir.
Rupali, you're also working?
Yes, sir. Sir, I'm working as a faculty.
As a faculty. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Very good, Rupali. Thank you. Anybody else? Any more questions? So we'll begin. If there are no more questions, we'll begin the session. Yeah.
So if you don't mind.
taken the question. Yeah, please go ahead. I'll be happy to understand the expectation.
So even I would want to put a question if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I would want to know that what are the different sources that most employers use to benchmark compensation.
Okay.
And another thing is, sir, what's the future outlook like for compensation? I mean to say, is there a concept of salary increase budgets in the in the organization, or how do we look at it?
Okay.
Thank you, sir. You may now continue, sir.
Yeah, I will. Thank you. So I'll take both these questions. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
In my discussion with you guys, I want to be very, very practical about. So it's more for the practitioner who are into the field of human resources and are dealing with compensation. This should be more relevant. But let me try and see how much value I bring into this program. Yeah. Let us start. So friends, the landscape of human resources, of course, will have the human resources, the strategy that an organization has towards the human resources. Strategy is possibly the belief that when you start the organization, you start with 2 people or 4 people, you have already created a belief system in the company. Okay. It is not necessarily an human resources belief, because most organizations are started by entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs, when they come together, they create the first layer, the deeper foundation of an organization, in which the culture is already embedded in the system. So the culture is bought by these people who start the business, and as they add more and more people, they try and see that the culture that they have developed, or they have helped them in the success of the setting up the organization, the success is always intact in the organization. Okay, so if somebody says that HR designs or decides the culture of the organization, well, in most cases that is not true. The organization culture is something which was started when the first idea came to the mind of an entrepreneur, that this is what I want to create, this is the service that I want to give, this is the money that I want to make, or this is the service that I want to give, or this is the employment opportunity that I want to create. But the moment he had conceptualized the business model, the culture also got conceptualized at that point in time. So it is intangible, can't be seen. So the HR strategy of an organization is also a creation, the fountainhead of that is the culture of the organization, as to what is the cultural element that the promoter, owner, and others want to bring. Yes, at some stage they want this to change. When an organization grows, they want a complete change, and then maybe a professional, formal HR or a organization culture through transformation can also be looked forward to. But mostly it is not so. Yeah, it's a very gradual process of change that can happen. So the HR strategy is nothing but an organization's outlook towards its people. Everybody writes in his book saying human resource is the most important asset, but that is more hearsay. That is not what is generally, it is believed. It is just a belief system that goes on, but you don't see the real value that that is there in the letter and the spirit of human resource, the most valuable asset being implemented. Okay. It's also true that human resources can be an asset and can also be a liability. So there is no one-way street in this. Somebody who is very valuable can become, if things change, if the model changes, if the skill set changes, if the skill is not required, can also become a liability in the system. So both things happen. A same person who does well may in a different environment not do well. Somebody who brings in certain skill sets also brings a certain limitation. So always remember that a asset, the human being is an asset, but to productively keep that asset productive is the job of obviously that individual, but also the responsibility of the organization, his peers, his immediate supervisor, to engage him, to energize him, and to get best out of him. Otherwise, no asset remains an asset all the time. Training and development is the another very important element in an organization human resources landscape, as to how do I train. Then we have a whole departments in most companies which does training, talent management, leadership development, executive development. That's one space. Then there is this whole recruitment space, because that's predominantly what HR does. 80%, 70% of the time, most HR executives and departments are busy hiring people, because in India we've hire at the same extent we keep losing people. There's a growing economy. Not everything is stable. There's a lot of imperfection in everything that we do. So on one side hiring, and the other side exits are all very common in most organizations, and recruitment has become a treadmill kind of a job for many organizations. It is also very strategic at one level, because if you don't have the right talent, all of us know that talent is the biggest differentiator between companies. So if you don't have the right talent, I'm sure you will lose out. You will not have a competitive edge, irrespective of whatever be your innovation capability or whatever be your resource capability. But talent is extremely important in driving organization success. Talent also means leadership. What kind of, at senior level, when we say talent, it's also the leadership. And it is no more a secret that leadership is responsible for 80% of organization success, irrespective of which sector it is, irrespective of how many years the organization has been, how old it has been, how strategic it has been, how politically connected it has been. But if it has not had the right leader, most organizations over 20-25 years have died down. But those with good leaderships have always kept their heads up, and they have been resilient organizations. They have kept coming back. The other function is OD and change management, which is transforming organizations, because after a point in time, you can't grow forward if you can't keep growing in the same pace that you want to, and you cannot run an organization as an entrepreneur beyond a point, especially if you're growing. And at that stage, you need various divisionalization of work, distributed workforce, regional structures, global structures, different entities, different units, different people to manage them, and thereafter, the organization, when it was created, possibly knew everybody. By at this growth phase, they would only know 4, 5, 10, 15 people in the system, and the rest to be managed through systems. So OD and change management is to create an environment which is self-disciplined, self-propagating, keeps the organization moving, measures performance in the organization, questions each other, does all the right things to make the organization a high performance place, so that it delivers goods to its stakeholders, in a more systemic manner. The other function, of course, is the employee engagement function, which is of late gained a lot of prominence. I've seen a lot of engagement officers of late. They do all kinds of work in terms of engaging people. The idea, well, they do is nothing easy, because engaging an employee has become a job today. Because employees can come to your offices or work from wherever, and they are not necessarily as empowered at times, not feeling as high as time, not feeling as energized at times, because end of the day, we do a lot of routine and monotonous work, and keeping them engaged and energized is a very important function. The core of this engagement reason is that an employee can perform at 40-50% and carry on his life without any eyebrows being raised, and the same employee can work at 125% and give extraordinary output. So to raise that delta from 40 to say 80 or 100 is what is the role of an employee engagement executive or HR function, which is employee engagement. So that he feels proud about being in the organization, he feels happy about himself, he feels more energized, he feels more happy, he feels more recognized, and he goes home and becomes a better citizen treats his people around him well, becomes a better leader. So that's the whole gamut of things that employee engagement has to do. While we may do very different tasks at times, but ultimately the output, if it is not this, then engagement is not happening. So this is the landscape of human resources, and this one important landscape is compensation and benefits. Correct, friends? Now, there's a question as to why is compensation important. Of course, compensation is extremely important because if none of the functions are working well, compensation can still do a lot for you, right? Compensation might not be the most important factor in determining whether an employee will stay, but it can tip the balance in the favor of the organization, because end of the day employee will say यार बहुत कुछ चल रहा है, जो भी हो रहा है, नहीं है retention, ये नहीं है, वो नहीं है, लेकिन मेरा at least I'm getting paid very fairly, and I think that will keep me here unless I get a better job, better paying job. So what does one look at when he joins an organization? In India, if you go to any campus, if you speak to yourself deep down in your heart, you will realize that all said, yeah, money makes a big difference. If I get money, it might be great, everything is great, but if you're not paying me, then why should I stay back? Okay, so money is a big decision maker, and if an organization has a lever of giving a better compensation, I think they gain a lot of mileage by doing that. The better your compensation, the more likely that you will be retained and as a key employee in the organization. Correct? Now, you agree with me, friends? Anybody? Any comment on this?
Yes, sir. Agree, sir. Agree. Right one.
Anybody? Any comment on this? Okay, I'm getting a lot of comments here saying yes, I agree. Yeah. Okay. So that's the important aspect of compensation. The other thing that we will talk is as an understanding point of view is compensation philosophy and approach of organizations. So there can be various philosophies. Most organizations do not talk about a compensation philosophy. Okay, they don't understand that there is a need for a compensation philosophy. So if organizations don't ask for it, most of you, if you work with smaller or SMEs, I mean, for you, compensation philosophy and all is all aliens word. This is only for this subject, particularly now, since we are also on this subject, compensation management as a subject is only for a very established and respectable organization function. This function is not there in most small organizations. There they only believe in payroll management because this is a very high-end subject for which provides a very different strategic advantage to an organization at a very different level. So if an organization has not matured and not grown to that level, trying to build a compensation practice may not yield much results, except that questions like what we had Someshri had raised or Lopa has raised, those questions become more pertinent as to how do I deal with a situation like this or with a situation like that. But nevertheless, we are talking about compensation philosophy because I would want you to understand that there is something called a compensation philosophy and approach that organizations should have. Okay, you may not necessarily go back to your organization and try to create a compensation philosophy, because even if you create, it will remain in paper and it will catch dust tomorrow or be lying in somebody's computer somewhere, right? But anyways, let me tell you what is a compensation philosophy. The compensation philosophy of an organization, it is belief that how it would want to pay its employee. Okay, what is this how I would like to pay my employee? The how here is basically trying to say, am I going to be a fair employer or an exploitative, or is never said, but I still state it for you, or I will try and be an opportunistic. Now, I want to be a fair employer means I will understand what is the right compensation for a certain level, accordingly I will hire, and accordingly I will pay. It also means that I will have a philosophy. Now these are sub dissections to it. If I get a guy who is drawing 4 lakh rupees, I will not give him 4 lakh plus 10%, which is our standard. We will say भाई हम तो increase में 10 से 20% देते हैं, आपको 480 मिलेगा. Correct? Now we don't look at anything else in the entire compensation approach and philosophy. कि भाई इस पोजीशन में क्या कॉम्पिटेंसी चाहिए, ये बंदा कितना एक्सपीरियंस ला रहा है, ये हायर कॉम्पिटेंसी का हो रहा है कि लोअर कॉम्पिटेंसी का है, from what background is coming. So if you get a guy who's coming from a micro SME, then we will say you are at 3 lakhs, I'll give you, instead of giving 4, I'll give you 3.5. If somebody comes at 7, I'll tell him I'll give you 8. If somebody comes at 18, I'll tell him I don't have any problem, I can still give you 20%, so I'll give you 21 lakhs. So there are organizations who look at this kind of an. Am I clear? This is nothing but having no strategy on compensation and no philosophy of compensation. But I can tell you, friends, 90% of the organizations work like this. Yeah, you will be surprised, but most organizations look at your current compensation and say, okay, itna mil raha hai, main iske upar itna dunga. There are very few organizations and large organizations which are very matured. Obviously, they've also been sometimes practicing this concept, but they have realized and they have grown big enough to have their own methods and systems of defining pay and compensation and saying, I don't care whether you are at 4 lakh, if you qualify, if you pass out my hiring fitment test, then the standard salary for this is 15 lakhs. That is one compensation approach that one has to define. So when you create an organization policy, these things have to be defined. You may not necessarily push in your organization, as I know it will be futile doing something like that, but just keep it in mind. The other organization compensation approach is very strategic, because if you are a noteworthy player in a particular segment, for example, you are coming in and going to start a integrated, let's say, steel manufacturing unit. What will you do? You will find that there are already some players, so you will benchmark. You will not benchmark, but you will know that there is Tata Steel, there is Bhushan, there is I think SAIL, and there is SR, and God knows some more, maybe Jindal. So you will look at all that. You will get their compensation structures from wherever you can through the help of consultants, and know what is the salary going on. Now, why would somebody join at the same salary with you? So when you are starting an organization, you have to pay a premium to get them into your organization. So companies have to have this philosophy, whether I want to compete in that space or what I want to maintain in that space. So the day you say I want to maintain, then you go to the benchmark. But the day you say that I want to compete in this space, then you have to give it 25%, 20%, kind of uptick to the benchmark, and say that here is where I will pitch myself, and here is where I will identify people and get them and start building my business. That is how businesses are built. So that is a compensation. So if you are a young player, new player into the market, then your philosophy and approach has to be maybe for the first 3 years I will pay and 95 percentile of the market, or 25 or 75 percentile of the market. But can you sustain 95 and 25 and 75% percentile over the benchmark? Any answers? Can this be maintained? Anybody wants to answer? Okay. No answers? Nobody wants to answer this? Okay. Nevertheless, so the compensation philosophy has to keep changing depending upon what life cycle the organization is in. If it is starting up something, you have to pay high compensation. If you don't have a brand, you have to pay high compensation. When you have developed the product and it's already now standard operation, you can bring down your compensation to what we say P40 or P50. What are these P? Ps are nothing but on a benchmark the percentile. So whether you are 50% of people pay above you and 50% pay less than you, that is called P50, P75 and P100. 100 is the topmost player. 75 is the next level from 100, and so on and so forth. So P45, P55 is a good level to keep your organization. Beyond that, you are making your product expensive, and unless you have a very highly innovative product or you have extremely high margins, like a for example, a chocolate maker like Nestle and Johnson & Johnson, or more innovative companies that we can talk about. These are the players who can possibly look at very high compensation payouts and bench themselves at a level of P75. And because I remember I was working in CRISIL and we were trying to benchmark at around P75, and that's the level where you will never lose people. In Bajaj Finance, for example, when we started the business, we wanted to benchmark at P90 because that is where we would get people. Otherwise, why would people leave other businesses and come to you? So, but today, after some of the years have passed by and businesses have become standard, then we have moved back to P50 levels. So that's compensation philosophy of an organization. The other philosophy within that is also the bell curve philosophy. Some people follow bell curve and some don't follow bell curve. I'm sure all of you know about bell curves, correct? Any answers?
Sir, is it like the performance level at the bell curve? We have PJX rating.
Yeah, so yes, it is to do with performance management, and performance management in India or any other country is related to compensation, correct?
Right, sir, right.
While-
But
while-
the rating and APD rating and all is related.
Yeah, so after performance appraisal is done, everybody wants an increment. Without an increment, nobody does performance management, correct?
Right, sir.
Though we might say that, no, my purpose of doing performance management was to understand training needs and so on and so forth. But the steam is lost. The moment you say performance management without increments, then the steam of the system is gone, correct? So when we do bell curve, we are trying to say that not all performance can be equal and I have to distribute employees. You understand that, correct? Distribution of performance. That is bell curve. We are trying to say that not all people at any points in time can be equal performers. So there will be average performers, poor performers, average performers, good performers, and superlative performers. And this is how I'm going to design or distribute my employees' performance so that 5 to 7% would always come as poor, maybe 25 will come as average and good, and then another 45 will fall in the middle category, and only 5 and 10% of the population will be on exceedingly high performance, whom I will go and reward. Exactly correct. So that's the bell that we will get. So organization GE had, as most people would know, GE had conceptualized this bell curve, and the whole idea of the bell curve was basically trying to weed out non-performance from the system. okay, which most organizations are unable to do. They follow bell curve, but we are not able to weed out, given our culture, good or bad, whatever. But unless the bell curve leads to weeding out, then the entire purpose is not getting solved. So organizations have designed methods of ensuring that the weeding out is not actually weeding out, but we retrain them and we do something. All that is cost, but the concept has changed of late. People don't like to hear hard stuffs like this. As it is, people don't stay back in organizations, and organizations have other compulsions. So we don't hear bell curve. Bell curve is actually also a kind of dying concept, because performance management is performance management and compensations, and these are practices which are looked upon by us as to what is, for example, Cognizant doing, what is Deloitte doing in this area, what is Pricewaterhouse doing in this area, what is Capgemini doing in this area. So these are basically big names like Arthur Andersen, Deloitte. What are their practices in compensation? So GE, for example. So GE has given up bell curve because it came under severe criticism for the ruthlessness that it has shown in eliminating the non-performance. Okay. Now, so most organizations want to be soft because they have actually gone into the engagement mode, and they know that they have to wear different hats at different times. They don't have to show that they are harsh, directly to the society at large. But if you look at, if you want to get it straight, then the answer is no, bell curve can die. Bell curve cannot die. It's like, we are confusing ourselves by saying that, I will have a socialist approach. And do they have a socialist approach? Most organizations, do you think they are following a socialist approach or giving everybody the same? End of the day, they are not. So how can bell curve die? Are they gone ahead and given 20% increments to all? No, they still have the same budget of 12% increment being distributed. So how are they doing it if bell curve is not there? So we often, missing the wood for the trees. Most of us view bell curve as a root cause that is performance management, because there are a lot of stigma attached to the bell curve, and we can't really do anything about this, because end of the day it is a capitalistic structure that we work in. It is a capitalistic environment. The whole approach in capitalism is that those who work hard take more risk, may it be an industrialist, may it be an organization, get more benefits and more fruits, may it be a country. So if it is applicable there, it will be applicable to employees. You can't at the end of the day come back and say, I don't care who works hard, who doesn't work hard, I will not have a bell curve and I will go and give similar increments to all. That never happens, right? So in order to make the organization competitive, okay, you have to have some kind of accountability for shoddy performance, and some kind of punishment for those who do not rise up to the expectation, or on the other hand, some kind of a reward, superior performance increments, so that there is a healthy tension between performance that drives the entire capitalistic system. And I don't think bell curve can be given up. Those who are trying to give up bell curve are the ones which have very matured environments in which they can empower the supervisor and still get to understand whether he is doing it right or not, right? They are doing that, and they have the methods and tools to ensure that that happens. I hope they have that. Otherwise, the empowerment is left to the unit manager to decide. He's given a budget nowadays and saying, I don't want a distribution curve, you take the budget and you decide. So end of the day, he is deciding, and he's becoming the center of doing that kind of activity. Instead of it being done at a company level or a group level, it is now getting done at the base level. So that's the only shift these organizations have made. So are they taking a risk by giving it in the hand of one guy? Yes, I think they are. So they think that they have systems and other feedback mechanism to understand if this person is misusing the empowerment given to them. They think they have. There are smarter guys who get away with it. And there are also, I would say, systems which give you proper feedback, whether it is a trusting environment, transparent environment where these things are done in a fair manner. Getting it, friends? Does it make sense? So that was about bell curve. Now, factors determining compensation. Yeah, this is very important. What factors go? There was one question also. Basis of salary structure, salary ranges. So factors that decide organization compensation. Okay. So the most important, the basic factors of compensation, friends. If there's any confusion in life, go back to the government gadget and look at the minimum wages gadgets and minimum wages salary ranges that government publishes. That becomes your base. Okay, that is where you know that this is the minimum wage that you have to pay somebody in the company. That's where your whole game starts. So if you are in the process of designing a compensation structure, you know that anything that you design has to be above the minimum wages. Minimum wages is also pretty complicated, and minimum wages are, in some cases, in some skill sets, are pretty high also. And they vary from city to city, state to state. But Delhi, for example, minimum wages would be 18,000 rupees, vis-a-vis in UP, which is about next door, but would be, say, about 11,000 rupees. That's the kind of difference between Delhi and Ghaziabad, for example, Noida or Ghaziabad, for example. So this is where is the starting point. But that's not important for us. It's just to keep it in mind for any academic purpose, that there is already a framework of minimum wages from where performance salary ranges are built upon. Otherwise, for people like us and you who are working in an organization, the other factors that decide compensation are your markets in which you are. For example, if you are in the pharma industry, then pharma industry is high margin industry, and it also over the last 10 years has become one of the high paying industries. Pharma increases, annual increases also been the highest and top of the order. The affordability has been good, so that is an industry, for example, which pays very high. The other industry, which was a sunrise industry so far, has been the IT industry. So which industry you are, whether you are in manufacturing or you're in IT or in services, in banking, is one important factor which to decide your compensation levels. The next thing is the strategy and the culture, which I said comes from the philosophy. If you remember that this is our philosophy and this is how we would want to go ahead and distribute money. So in this one mathematical element that most people keep in mind is that I don't mind spending 20% of my revenue for salaries. So if I make 100 crores, I don't mind spending 20 crores against salaries. Are you getting me? So these are thumb rules. Okay, this is not true for service sector, but this is very true for manufacturing. In manufacturing also, this cannot be taken as sacrosanct. Now, in manufacturing, if margins are low, then the salary could be anything up to 10% of the entire revenue. So there are some benchmarks that if you put for yourself, you can actually, these could be factors that determines your how much should be the compensation budgets, and hence individual compensation. The other aspect would be responsibility and the position that you want to give, grade structures that you would have designed, cost of living. For example, you have a unit which is in Bihar, but you have a branch office which is in Jammu and Kashmir. So you would have a different cost structure in Jammu and Kashmir. You would have a different cost structure in Pondicherry. So what is the cost of living of that particular state or the particular city will also be a factor that will go into designing your compensation. Then the other aspect is stage of the company. As I told you, if you are a young company, you're just come together and you have got all the private equity investment with you, and you want to set something up. Will you be paying high or low to start? Hello? Yeah, please comment in between. Huh? Hello?
Yes, sir.
So if you are a startup company, what would be your strategy, to pay more or less?
It's obviously less, sir, if it is startup.
Yeah, if it is a startup.
Yes, sir, if it is a startup, because they cannot pay high salaries. So generally the salaries would be little less compared to the established companies.
Okay. Now, if it has no resource crunch as a startup, so that is where there is a resource crunch, and you have rightly said, because a lot of e-commerce companies are giving ESOPs and don't have too much cash to give, but they are giving very high value ESOPs to employees, and that's how they are managing. But let me say that if ESOP is not an option, what would you do? And you want to set something up very quickly. So see, if you are a startup, but if you want talent, how will you get it? You are a startup for sure, but you want talent.
Pay more and pull them in.
Yeah, exactly. So as a startup, the rule is that you have to end up paying more, because there's a lot more work in a startup. It is a different equation that we have now designed, or a different product that we have designed, saying ESOPs, which comes into play, and we say, okay, take part in salary and part as ESOPs, because ESOPs will make you, if we do well and we get a high valuation, then your ESOPs could be running into multi-million dollars. So you can make a lot of money on the side through ESOPs. But those organizations, let's say, don't have any ESOPs. You have no other option but to go and pay more. So the rule is pay more in case you are starting something.
So I believe that's where the concept of
That's where the concept of coaching comes in, right, sir?
Explain that.
So when we are trying to start a new company and we do not have any kind of cash crunch, so and we look forward to take people from companies which are already established. So people they are already getting paid a lot of money. So we target those people who have that much of experience and could contribute to our company. So we pay them more and we get them to our company.
Exactly. That is what happens. It leads to to acceleration of salary or rat race in terms of compensation. Yes, that does trigger that.
Yes.
But that's the only way if you want to start up and you're aggressive, because most people have already done it. They are sitting there. They don't have too much exciting work. They all leave and come because for higher salaries and for growth opportunity. So they come to you.
Right, sir.
And we also believe that if you're starting up, then you've already done your budgeting, you have got your cash in place, you have done your financial closure, you have got 100 crores to spend to start up. So you have to spend that 100 crores and start up. Over 3 years, there is a timeline given to you. In 3 years, I want the product out and I want the entire distribution system out. So people will go aggressively hire, put everything in place. It's like that. It's like setting up a new company. Supposing I want to set up a new manufacturing unit, I'll go and buy, I'll go abroad, I'll do my shopping, I'll come back, I'll set it up in India. Correct? So I'm obviously buying new equipments, new assets, which will cost me more than somebody else's assets, correct? That is the
Yes, sir.
approach that we have to use.
Right, sir.
Otherwise, the startup will linger. It will start one day, then it will go slow, then people will leave. Again, you will get some money, you will again start something. This kind of startups are also there, which never go anywhere. Yeah. So these are the factors. Anybody else? Not getting many comments. I hope you're not gone to sleep. Yeah.
Sir?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We have also seen startups like taking contacts from friends and family with very less pay or no pay initially. Then gradually, when it picks up, you get paid. You have to handle multiple profiles, sir. How about that, sir?
So these are entrepreneurs. What's the name?
Someshri, sir.
Someshri. So these are Someshri entrepreneurs who
Sir.
believe in doing something on their own. So if I am starting something and my wife and my children have to work in it, or my brother has to work in it, then then it's a very different ball game.
Okay.
Or I'll rope in one friend who has nothing to do, so and make them partners in the business, and they all will strive and work towards a certain goal. So that is not really comparative. And this could be a self-exploiting role also. End of the day, you might not get anything. But why will somebody who has a regular income leave and join you? And I believe, and our belief should be that while anybody can do anything, but talent has a price, and a proper talent who's doing a proper work with a proper tool, with a proper system, has to be paid something. Otherwise, he will not move.
Yes, sir. Sir, like going forward with Atmanirbhar concept, like can it be relatable?
What is Atmanirbhar concept?
Atmanirbhar Bharat, and we are into this startups or entrepreneurship, working on it.
Atmanirbhar is basically self-reliance in terms of manufacturing, correct?
Right, sir.
Right. So what has that to do with not paying, and what has that to do with exploiting each other?
Okay, sir.
It has no connection. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Atmanirbhar only means that I should not be dependent upon foreign countries for products that I can make in India. Right.
Yes, sir. Right, sir.
Okay, great. So the other aspect I want to say which determines your compensation is affordability. Okay, there are two kinds of companies. One is companies which are in the monopolistic space, or which are in the government space, where affordability, non-affordability does not matter, because it is all subsidized by the government. The government continues to pay your bill, your salary, whether you make money or not make money, profit, no profit. You keep getting. If you make profits, then the employees will come forward and demand bonuses and more for themselves, which is logical. But if the entity does not make money, the government steps in and keeps paying the salaries. So I'm not talking about those category of affordability. I'm talking about affordability in other businesses, private businesses or SME businesses. So if an SME or a large entity in the private space is not able to generate money, it will not be able to pay. Okay, that's the fundamental concept. And if it is able to generate a lot of money, then it will continue to pay, and it can pay you, at 50 percentile, at 100 percentile, it can pay you bonuses, and it can pay you anything. But most important is affordability of the organization. And affordability is about how much revenue you do, end of the day, how much is your operating cost, and after the operating cost obviously has salaries also built into it, and after that operating cost, how much is the profit that an organization makes, okay, which is profit before depreciation, and then after depreciation, then after tax, and then net profit. So if the organization affordability is there, you will continue to get your salaries and bonuses, and if that is not there, it cannot go on for long. No place can afford to pay you. Also, in context of this, you have to remember that no industry, no entrepreneur, no owner, forget the government, I'm not going to talk about them, is paying you from his pocket. Okay, the salary that one gets comes from the customer. So as long as the customer is there, as long as the organization is able to sell something at a margin to a customer, no salaries can continue to come. It can happen, for example, startup, customer is not paying you. The owner has already collected some money, it has 100 crores to spend, so it will pay you as long as it has 100 crores. Once 100 crores is over, his pocket is empty, he'll go away. Okay, unless he gets fresh money and he has a fresh desire to pump in more money. So affordability, when we talk about affordability, you have to understand that it's not about affordability in terms of bank में पैसा कितना पड़ा है, या फिर बैंक लाइंस कितने पड़े हैं आपके पास, या प्राइवेट इक्विटी का कितना पैसा पड़ा है. That is not your affordability. Affordability is whether the customer is giving us business and we are able to generate good revenue after operating expenses or before operating expenses, either ways at least. And if that is yes, then you know that your salaries are safe and they will continue to come. The other factor is of course time and experience that you have on the role. This is to do also with the fact that with time you become better in your roles and you are adding more value to the organization. But at times this does not happen. You just because you're getting older in the system, you keep getting more and more salary. That is also happening. So one stroke corrections will also happen. Organization will restructure and bring in tools and methods to say that if the value addition has not happened, then compensations cannot go up and it is a dead end. So there was a question which says, how does how companies keep paying you year after year? Does salary keep coming year after year? Increases will keep coming year after year. So India is a very unique country. Why do we have a system of annual increments and every year our compensation goes up? It's very unique to the world that in India we will have about 8 or 9% minimum increase in most industries. Now, why does this happen in India? Why is it that my counterparts in Europe are getting nothing, no salary increases for years, or maybe 1 or 2% salary increases? The reason is that India has high inflation. We have 7 to 8% inflation that keeps hitting us. So what increment we are getting is by and large covering up for the cost increase in cost structure. Now, organizations don't mind doing that because the revenues from customer are also going up by 10%. So they don't mind giving also 10% to us as our annual increment. If the two don't match, then we will also start suffering. At the same time, organizations and individuals have to be sure that they are bringing more and more value so that the customer continues to pay us a little more than last time. So that kind of effort also has to come in. But all this is not always practical to look at, but theoretically it makes sense to look at all this. Yeah. So so there is something, friend, that you should know when we talk about compensation benefit. We talk about a total reward system in an organization. So if you are, for example, a compensation head or a recruitment head, and you have to talk about a complete package that an organization offers, how are you going to position this? So the first basket or the first very elementary things comes in salary is your basic salary, your first monthly salary, your net take-home salary, your gross take-home salary. This is the first base, what is called the base salary, which is your gross or your net. These are your bases. After that comes incentives that organizations offer, bonuses. Then comes perks that might be there, transportation perk. You have some other perks like certain reimbursements or gifts, annual gifts that the company will have, or there are some organizations which gives you excellent canteen facility, some gives you stay facility. So these are the other rewards. Financial rewards is what we call it. So this put together is a better mix than only talking about the base pay. After that, still, if you want to look at it and take a leap and say, no, there's more in the system, then there are something called ESOPs, one-time, performance bonuses, and something called deferred cash bonuses or LTIPs, which are designed to hold an employee, which is designed both to attract as well as to hold an employee over a period of 4 years and 5 years. So when I give an ESOPs, there is a very nice scheme to give an ESOP, which will be vested over 3 years and exercised over the next 3 years. So the guy is in your system for about minimum 4 to maximum 7 years. And if it keeps coming, like you've seen in many good institutions like SDFC and others, guys who leave the system or retire or sell their ESOPs after about 7, 8, 9 years are actually multimillionaires because of the ESOP schemes. So these are three elements that we talked about: basic pay, other financial benefits that one gets, which also has your car loans or housing loan, all that. We spoke about some of this. Then I spoke about the long-term incentives like ESOPs and deferred cash bonuses. And then we also the last one ahead of that is non-financial and environment per se that an organization offers, which can also be positioned very nicely to an incumbent. Like the work environment, the infrastructure that you provide, the praise, recognition, time off, holidays, peers, the kind of people you're going to work for, and various other environmental aspects, health, security, recreation facilities, clubs, all these benefits that you provide are the non-financial part of the reward, which are very, very important. Though you cannot convert it into tangibles, but if one has to really pay for these benefits, they will have to pay from their nose to get these benefits sometimes. But many organizations have these benefits, and that's a part of the total reward package for an individual. So one is your financial rewards, immediate base pays, the other is your benefits, the third is your incentives, and the fourth is your non-financial awards. So if any organization has all the four, then I think it's a very solid framework that they would have developed to attract talent as well as retain talent. While I'm on this, there is a lot of pressure from youngsters in organizations. Supposing a guy comes and says, my salaries are gross pay is 50,000 and after deduction I get 40,000 and this is too low. And I tell him that, you have canteen facility, you have a transportation facility. So canteen, I spend almost 40,000 on you on an annual basis. On transportation, I spend 2 lakhs on you. Then on certain other benefits that I'm giving you, the cost is so much. And all that put together, I show him an amount of, say, 3 lakhs in a year. If he turns around and says, sir, I don't want any of this, why don't you convert this into cash and give it to me? Okay. So otherwise, I have an offer which is 70,000 rupees, and against 70,000 seems quite attractive, and I would like to leave and go for that. So what does an individual do in this situation? Because not everybody is willing to appreciate this long list of reward systems that you have in the organization. Okay, so this is again the philosophy, but your philosophy is acceptable to a certain class of employees or a certain age group and not acceptable to a certain age group, then what do you do? So there's no straight answers to these. Okay, so a lot of organizations have started moving on to a something called a cafeteria approach. They have converted all these benefits into cash component, and they have started telling their employees that if you don't want these benefits, you can take cash against that. Okay, the cash is always taxed, so the employee has the option of taking benefits and all benefits in terms of cash. But then systems don't work like that always. You can't have a because when you put up infrastructure into money into infrastructure, you cannot say that I will only have an option for you to use the infrastructure or not use the infrastructure. So I believe that it's not easy call to take, but in certain elements you can still take that call. Transportation, one can take that call. Canteen, one may or may not be able to take that call. In some other benefits, that for example, if you're giving him an annual gift and the guy wants to get a cash, I think you can do something about that. So there is a line that one has to draw. It is also about the culture that you want in the organization, basis where the total reward system can be tuned upon. But there is a lot of pressure to look at CTC, not only from an employee side, but also from the stakeholder side. Even the stakeholders have started questioning that why are you running these schemes, where is benefits, where I don't see the benefits, so why don't you give cash and finish it off so that my balance sheet is clear, I know how much am I paying. But then large organizations don't do that. Smaller organizations crumble into this. Any questions, friends, so far? Hello?
Yes, sir. Sir, they have shared their questions through the chat box. Once you stop delivering, I may put those questions to you one by one.
Okay.
Yes.
But anybody wants me to, interject and take this discussion forward, please do that, okay? Otherwise, it will become a monologue. So if any, yeah, go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. I have a question for you. As we discussed about many factors of compensation, it is okay. It is a good benchmarking, in fact. But in current scenario during COVID, many of the employees are remotely working, and secondly, entrepreneurs or owners, company owners, they are not much interested to invest in infrastructure, cafeteria, and all. Right. So how these kind of benefits are going to be helpful in near future?
See, these are very important benefits, but we are talking about whom is very important. See, try and understand from a demographic standpoint, 90% of the workforce works for smaller businesses, okay, and smaller SMEs in India who do not have the infrastructure or the money to create infrastructure. They just work as contractors with others, and once the revenue doesn't come to them, they only believe in revenue. If revenue comes, then I can run my business. I can pay salaries and I can pay whatever else I want, and I can carry on with my business. If revenue doesn't come, then I have no bank line, I have nothing. I cannot pay, I cannot carry on any benefit. So out of the, for example, if we have a workforce of about, let's say, 18-20 crores, that is the kind of workforce that we will have, I guess. How many of them do you think are working for organizations which are having canteens and benefits and so on and so forth, or what we might call highly respectable organizations? Very few. So I don't think more than maybe 7-8 lakh out of the 19 crores, maybe let's say hardly 1 crore will also not get that facility. Correct?
Right, sir.
Yeah. So the rest will never have it, because Indian entrepreneur is a SME, and for him revenue नहीं आया COVID में तो खत्म, game खत्म है उसका.
That's true. That's why I'm asking what could be a new model, compensation model that on a small scale entrepreneur can afford.
There's no, see, compensation models can only be designed if you have money, for example, and you have a philosophy. जिसके ends meet नहीं होते हैं, पहले तो वो end ही meet कर रहा है, तो उसके लिए compensation philosophy दूर की बात है, वो उसमें जाता ही नहीं है. इसलिए मैंने आपको कहा है कि compensation as a subject only is relevant for organizations which are very respectable. समझे ना, ये जो सब्जेक्ट है जो मैच्योर्ड ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस के लिए है, ये सबके लिए नहीं है. उसके लिए तो
understood. Yes, that part I completely agree. But since I'm working with the SMEs, so I am facing few challenges to design a compensation model. That's why my question was like, how can we make a very attractive compensation model in this, looking on the current scenario?
See, ये तो which institution or which company would have predicted, or which researchers have predicted or something like this will happen?
That's true.
Nobody, okay? Abhi, in retrospect, people can talk about anything, but nobody had ever had any planning for something like COVID. They had planned for many business discontinuity areas or items, but nobody planned for what COVID could do to them. Nobody had anticipated. So I know friends who are in SME and who thought that in 3 months problem will be solved. But and they continued to pay for 3 months, but they started regretting their decision after 3 months, saying that all my money is over now. Where do I go? So this is very low probability, catastrophe which has happened, and no model is based on low probability. Models that we have, whatever design we do is on high probability items. We never design anything for such a low probability item. What can you design? You can design a scheme which we say, I will deduct 100 rupees and keep it with me for a bad day. Correct? I'll create a trust fund. Then owner has to put money in that again. Or you will take employees' money and keep it. And if the incident doesn't happen for 5 years, where does the money go? And how much money will you take from him? As it is, he's not getting. What is the per capita income? What is India's per capita income? About $1,800, correct? Annually. That is our per capita income. $1,800 in purchasing, and in purchasing parity, it is about $5,000 because we are a little cheaper in terms of purchases. So let's say $5,000 is our purchasing parity, which is not even 15-day salary of a US average wage earner. In 1 year, what I earn is what this guy will earn in 15 days in the US.
Right, sir.
Yeah, and what security do we create out of this money? Government has no money. SME has no money. Banks are not willing to fund them, and banks will not fund them because banks themselves are sitting on high NPAs and a lot of other problems. So trying to say that I'll create a scheme and all needs a huge reform. So I mean, it's opening up a Pandora's box. It doesn't happen that easily. You can create some scheme here and there, but you come back to me with a specific problem that you're facing, and we'll try and see what quick fix we can do around it.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
So key skills, if you are in a compensation role, okay, you are in the job of doing compensation, deciding compensation, doing compensation benchmarks, and so on and so forth, then I think what you need is job analysis and job evaluation skills. Somebody was asking me, how do you really differentiate compensation and compensation benchmarking? That was the question that was raised. Rupali or somebody had raised this question. Different sources of compensation benchmarking. So before answering that, let's understand that to understand benchmarking, first you need to know the role, the job. Okay, what is the job? It is not just the title on the basis of which benchmarking can be done. because people can give various titles to the same role. So what is the job analysis and how do I do job evaluation? These are the skills that one should learn. Okay, so job analysis and job evaluation is a methodology. There is something called Hayes methodology. You should go to the internet and see if you can get that for yourself. That's a framework given wherein a job is broken into various elements as to what it takes to do this job. How much of brain it takes, how much of coordination it takes, how much of talking it takes, how much of complexity it takes, how much of problem solving it takes, how much of others' intervention does it take, to do this job. And all this is given, and if you define the job, all this is given a certain point, and that is called the point-based rating. And you total up all these points and finally, so that is the framework given. You can go to the internet and check this, something called Hayes job evaluation methodology or point ratings scale system. Within that, you can arrive at a number for the job. So every job, if you put there, you will get a number saying, okay, this job has high complexity, more routine, low complexity, more routine, okay, more knowledge, less knowledge, very high knowledge, more collaboration, less collaboration, individual job, collective job, and accordingly it will give you a weightage. That is a point scale that you arrive at. This point scale can be multiplied by a unit, which is the salary unit, and you can come to a proper salary that you would like to give to this particular role. This is your benchmark. Now, benchmarks are available from an industry standpoint by generally at consultants level. So there are compensation consultants and specialists who survey organizations and constantly keep themselves upgraded with what is the compensation for a certain job in a certain company. Okay, so you can always get, but what you need to get is your industry benchmark. If you are in pharma, you should get a pharma. If you're in finance, get a finance benchmark. If you are in manufacturing, get a manufacturing. Within manufacturing also, steel will be separate, cement will be separate, infra will be separate. So there are organizations which have these cuts. Basically, it's a whole data pile of what organizations are paying for various jobs, and that gives you your benchmark as to where you are versus where they are. And in some jobs you'll be at P25, some jobs you'll be at P90, some jobs you'll be at P70, 60, whatever. So you have to benchmark that, understand where the large gap is, and then balance it out so that when you find a job sitting at P90, then you know that I'm already overpaying for this job, and where you're paying P25, then you know that you're underpaying for the job. So in your management action, you can take some course corrections. So that is something that one has to learn from a skill. Data analysis, you should be very good in Excel and business analytics. If you know business analytics, tools or techniques of business analysis, data churning tools, that will be really very, very helpful for you to do compensation work. Excel especially, I'm not even saying go to BI. BI is a very high-end stage, but I think you need advanced Excel knowledge to be able to be a good compensation specialist because you are handling a lot of data. Then obviously you should develop expertise on company policy, company's business model, affordability, how much money is it making, how much can it pay, what are the budgets, how much is possible to squeeze for salaries, take away for incentives, what is the margin that it has, and what are the various scenarios you can build about salaries, analysis of market and what does market say, and then communication and transparency related work, which means that I will communicate to employees about their salaries, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that side also, which is highly beneficial. Yeah, when you tell the employee what his salary is and what is the benchmark of the industry, so a lot of companies go forward and tell the benchmark that this is the benchmark, this is what I'm paying you, this is the gap, this is how I'll cover the gap itself. And another very important skill is negotiation. When you sit down with the candidate and you obviously want the candidate to be happy, and you also don't want to overpay. So you have to create a win-win for yourself, for your organization, and for the candidate. Candidate should never feel that he has been shortchanged, and at the same time, you cannot end up going overboard in paying the guy. Understanding and empathizing that in-hand salary and income tax issues, a lot of my colleagues do not empathize. They say income tax is your problem, not my problem, and they walk away from that discussion. This is not the right way to handle any candidate. Is in-hand salary is important. Once that is sorted out, his gross becomes important. When that is sorted out, his tax comes into picture. So he'll come with various things, and I think all that has to be answered. And he should feel that we empathize with whatever we are talking, and we should have a upper hand in this discussion. Also, you should have some rope as a compensation specialist in your hand, so that you can drop in some money where you feel is required and necessary to be done. Yeah, rather than being very tight-fisted or not having any scope and then losing out a candidate unnecessarily. Internal comp ratios, you should be able to design and maintain. These internal comp ratios are nothing but we spoke about P90, and then P90 is what is the comp ratio, your guy versus, if your benchmark is P90, then where is your guy against P90? Or if your benchmark is P70, then what is the comp ratio, the gap between your guy and what you want to benchmark against. And then we talked about linking compensation with performance. So there was a question also that I think who had asked, measuring performance. Lopa had asked this, measuring performance linked to bonus. So friends, we in compensation, there is a lot of pressure of late to build a variable pay. Okay. Why organizations want to build variable pay? The answer is very simple, because they don't want a situation where salaries are paid upfront and profitability is not coming. So organization want to hedge this element. They're saying, I understand you need compensation, but I will pay you so much as fixed and so much as variable. The variable component will come to you only if I get the profitability. If I don't get the profitability, then possibly the variable will vary. It will not be very high. So I will ensure only in-hand salary, and I will have a very high variable salary for you. So the year I do well, I'll pay you well. If I don't do well, I'll not pay you well. If I would have taken the whole thing in my compensation, then what happens is that the financial of the company look pretty bad, because it has to be factored as operating expenses, the entire thing, right? So that is the need of the hour. Many organizations are coming up with this. It is not succeeded in the sense that they would have wanted it to be. But yes, variable pay is also very popular in financial services and in some business, in some high-end positions like the CEO's positions, business head positions. In most companies, variable pay are getting created, but still far away from what it has to be. New salaries, now I'm going to some questions that they have taken. Getting new talent at high price, hiring new recruits at high salaries. Okay. So yes, this is a problem, because let's say that we are part of a standard or a structured organization, and we have given our increments in April. Okay. And now we are attracting, we want a talent, and the guy comes in the month of September. So your guy who is there in the system has got an increment in April. So he moved from, say, 10 lakhs to 12 lakhs in April. Now, the guy whom I'm picking in a like-to-like situation, let us say, same benchmark, everything is same, similar organization, similar competition. The guy there from 12, I'm trying to pick, he will definitely come at 14. He will not come at 12. So we find that we have an inequality in the organization. Okay, this is very plain vanilla explanation to how things may not happen in this manner, but I'm just explaining. The guy got his increment in the previous company. You hired him in April. His increment after increment was 12. You hired him, and he is now at 14 because you gave him a 20% increase. In most organizations, this would have happened. So now you have created imbalance. your guy in your existing system is at 12 and you've got a guy at 14. What do you do with this situation? Yeah. So this will always happen, friends. And that's why there are two ways of handling this. One is that when the guy comes in after taking an increment from a previous organization, then we can obviously structure his next increment 12 months from now, so that the guy in the system gets an increment before this guy. That is one. The other thing is to tell your internal candidate that yes, this is the difference, but we will catch up in the next 6 months. That we will also correct his salary in the next 6 months, also and so forth. So these are only two ways of doing. These are also benchmarks for us. If a guy comes in at a higher salary, same competency levels, everything is same, then it is a very clear indication to us that the market outside is high, and if my guy goes out, then this is the kind of compensation you would easily get. Not as solid, not based on solid data. This kind of things work, but by and large, we will have to keep a cushion and take this decision more with generosity. If you can, and that is the best way to deal with these situations. I'll go to some other questions that have been asked. One second. So before that, there are some very important legislations that our compensation specialists have to be aware of. Yeah. And some of this is like having, if you're doing compensation in a company, you should know everything about Minimum Wages Act. What is the Minimum Wages Act, and what are the various wages, and what are the structures and slabs of minimum wages. Second is the Payment of Wages Act. Third is Gratuity Act, ESI Act, Provident Fund and Risk Provision Act, Maternity Act, Bonus Act, Apprenticeship Act, and I think, yeah, these are some of the acts that you should be very well aware of. The other thing you should be aware of is reading of financials and balance sheet. Understanding P&L, if not the balance sheet, but the profit and loss account reading of any company you should know. How much is the margin? Where is the company making money? How much of its salaries is factored in the operating expenses? Year on year, is my salaries in the operating expense going higher, coming down? So these are very important aspects for a compensation specialist to be aware of. Also, what is important that is Income Tax Act. What is the income tax laws? What are the various slabs of income tax? Now there are two. There is one direct tax, straight tax method, and now there is slabs also for whatever you want to do. There were tax of up to 3 lakhs, 3 to 5 lakhs, 5 to 10. So what is the tax rates against that? What happens? What is the additional surcharge? There is a surcharge on tax on salary. There is a different surcharge for salary above 1 crore. So what are these surcharges? These are very important elements for every compensation specialist to know. He should be able to churn out a Form 16 of an employee, and he should also be able to advise him on his investments. He should be able to advise on the structure, right structure of the salary. Because if your salary structure is correct, then you can make it a little more tax efficient. So what is tax efficiency within the salary structure? HRA, what is the advantage of HRA in a salary structure? What is the advantage of, for example, food coupons in a salary structure? So how can I break the salary structure so that I bring in elements which are tax friendly? Are they really tax friendly, or they appear to be tax friendly? So some of these things, if you know, you can add a great value to the organization. You can learn them also as you work in the compensation space. You talk to the finance guys or the CFO of the organization or tax experts, and they will tell you how to structure compensation. It's a very important skill to have. So also car allowances and car pool, car schemes, depreciation of car, and how an organization can benefit out of car. Can a car be given to an employee? What is the tax issues? How does it become a depreciation? in the hands of of a company, but and is exempted out from an employee's salary. So those things also, so that you can make good schemes around it. Section 80cc benefits. What are the benefits of savings? Which funds you can put money and get tax benefits? All that you should know. These are very important elements for a comp specialist to be aware of. Other than the fact that he is to be an expert in data churning. Yeah. Just one second. Hello. Yes. I'm actually on a call. So you have to call me about half an hour late. Yeah, friends. So this is on the subject. If I have to take more questions, measuring performance linked bonus. Okay. So this various schemes you can make. I think one question Lopad asks is measuring how to measure performance linked bonus. I think the question is how to create a variable pay plan. Basically, how do I create a performance based variable pay plan for an employee? So that's an important element. Most people want to create that, but measuring performance is hence becomes a very important element, because you've created something like that. How do you measure and how do you give that money? So there is balance scorecard technique available. That's the easiest and the most acceptable framework. Balance scorecard talks about balancing performance across 4 segments, or which is customer, operations, revenue, and leadership, or team development and leadership. So around this you keep giving some targets. That is from a learning and operational standpoint, you will develop this process and this methodology in the organization, or from a customer centricity you will develop this, from a innovation perspective you will create this, or from a revenue perspective this is what you will add, and around that you put the various amounts, and saying if you do this I'll give you so much, if you do this I'll give you so much, and so on and so forth. And then various levels of performance can also be created within that, and hence you can design something. So balance scorecard is a very nice way of designing a variable pay plan or a performance pay plan for an individual. So getting new talent, we have already discussed at a high price. You end up getting at times high, but you can have both ways. You can also get a talent which is at lower salary. So, but that's not the question being asked. If you get a talent at a high compensation and you have somebody in the same job working at a lower compensation, then I think you need to get up and do something about this new talent so that he's not demotivated. But you can give him a timeline. It's not that you have to always do it instantly. You have to tell him that in the next appraisal this will be covered up and this will be taken care of, either through a correction or through a normal increment. But if the two are not equal, if the competencies levels are not equal, then you don't have to really, then you have to go and explain that to him, rather than just saying that you can piggyback basis what I have done in the market. That's never a right answer. But that judgment is yours, whether he is end of the day giving you that kind of an output. If the output is same, everything is same, then you have to go and correct that compensation. Basis of salary structure, salary ranges. So we've discussed this. Minimum wages is one. Second is you can design something from there onwards. You can design a pay scale. You can design a grade structure and a pay scale. So generally there is a grade structure which is a level structure, a grade structure, and a pay structure. So all the three are 3 columns that you need to create. Put 3 columns, right levels. Most organizations should not look at more than 4 levels of people in an organization. Most of them look at the grades as levels. That is wrong way to look at, because you cannot have policies which could be running into 17 grades, or you don't want to cut your organization into 17 grades. So you cut your organization into levels, which is generally not more than 4 levels, which is the base level, the supervisory level, the managerial level, and the top leadership level. These are the 4 levels in the organization. But within each level, you can have 3 or 4 grades, and these grades are to show you year-on-year improvement or appreciation of growing, and pay scales can be around each of the grades. So you can have four. We are talking about 4 levels, maybe 8 or 9 grades, and each grade's having a pay scale. Now, pay scales, you might find it very difficult to populate it from the beginning, but as people come into these grades, you can constantly build this up also. In case you have a very scientific approach to building these grades, hats off to you, because that's the right way to do. But most organizations will keep it open, and unless you are from a particular industry where it is very, very scientific and you already have those grade structures. But in most service industries and most industries that you would be, you will not have that kind of liberty. So you will hire somebody because he was at 4 lakhs and you took him in a grade so and so because the grade has a certain title, and accordingly you can incrementally populate and see what is it throwing back to you, and then convert that into a formal structure. So Kaustubh had asked a question on expat salary, India and abroad. So expat salary is another very complicated area to look at. So experts salary depends upon multiple things. One is the approach. So how much money you want the guy to make is also very important, because an expat is coming only because there is a lot of money at stake for him. So he will not want to come to India and take Indian compensation, right? India, if a guy is coming into India, he is coming in at a European salary. Well, how does it make sense? How does it, I mean, on what is the basis? Because the cost of living is 1/10 of that of, say, Europe. Okay, a guy coming from London into India, will he take an Indian salary and come here? No, he will not. So none of these things work. The approach works in that case, and the approach here is that they will look at giving him a certain increase for the hardship in India. So that will be some approach that the organization will have, that you're drawing a certain amount of money. Your certain amount of money will be available to you, whereas I'll make everything else free for you in India. So those are generally the agreements that I have seen happening. But you'll have to pay certain tax in India. This is Indian income and so on and so forth. Or tax is also very complicated. It's not simple. Sometimes the Indian government might even tax him for his salary abroad. So all that taxation has to be equalized for the guy. If there is any tax liability, that has to be equalized. And he comes here because he is important for the organization vision in the country of destination. In Indian going abroad, for example, if an Indian going to Middle East, the initial thumb rule was 4 times salary initially. When I was younger, I remember it was 4 times. So if you were in India drawing 20,000 rupees, then it was very clear that you would get a lakh rupee, Indian rupee, which would be 10,000 dirhams or something in the Middle East. So 4 times was the one of the benchmarks. But these benchmarks are not coming out of nowhere. These benchmarks are coming out of the fact that there is a certain lifestyle and there is a certain expense to live that lifestyle. So an Indian going abroad to the US, while he will makes 10 times more money, I think he also spends 5 times more money. Okay, and that has to be factored, because you cannot live the way you live here. You cannot live the way you live here in the US. And I'll call you back. Yeah. So now India's going out. Also, I have seen Indian businesses setting up structures like this, that I'll take care of your increase in cost in Europe or in China, for example. So I'll give you a place to stay. I'll give you a place to eat. It's a foreign land completely. You anyways will not find your food unless I provide you. So I'll take care of this, I'll take care of that, I'll take care of all this, and your compensation in India will be available to you. So a lot of people agree and a lot of people don't agree. Some people say, no, I want compensation at the level of Singapore. I want compensation at the level of Hong Kong. Okay, so both things are correct. So if you are very competitive and if you want the best talent, then you have to pay compensation as available for those roles in those cities. That is the best way to look at. And most banks, for example, if they depute you to abroad, would actually look at the compensation of that place and pay you. Pairing when there is a downside. It's only when there is a downside of compensation such issues come up. For example, if a guy coming, as I said, you from Britain, from London to India, there is a downside for him on compensation. So in that case, it will be a very different agreement and a very different reason. Kaustubh, is it?
Yeah, that is helping. Thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure, Kaustubh. Otherwise, Kaustubh, there are these international benchmarks also. If you go to payscale.com,
Okay.
payscale.com will actually, if you populate all the details, it will throw up the new number for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can use these sites. Now there's a lot of benchmarks available, on the internet for you to be clear as to what should be this. Obviously, it can never be accurate. It will be because the statistical number, end of the day, it is the statistic that is being thrown onto you. So
True.
you have to look at whether you want mean or average or a model. Yeah, I think
Correct.
mode makes more sense, but you have to do that kind of work for you.
Thank you so much for your help. Thank you.
Pleasure. So I think I've answered some of the questions that we have taken earlier. Future outlook of compensation. So compensation future outlook in India seems very bright, friends. I mean, if inflation is at 7%, 8%, then compensation will keep growing at 7, 8%. And it's a very imperfect market. There is dearth of talent. So if you are talented and if you're ambitious and you dream of a salary, I think till 40s you can actually grab and get any desired salary that you are thinking, provided you are mobile and you don't say that I want to stay in my city and this is where I want a job. If you're willing to take risk, if you're willing to travel, if you're willing to keep developing your skill sets, your salaries can double every third year. That is the kind of goals also you can keep. I'm not by any ways going to divert from here and saying is salary the right thing to take or is coming. I don't want to get into that discussion at this stage. That is obviously all of you are smart and we know our answers to our problems. But I'm purely sticking on salary. Up to 40, 45 years, you can actually jump jobs. There's lots of job available. Look at new skill sets, which are the skill sets that are in demand. Have very good understanding of business analytics, business models, data churning. These are skills important for every job nowadays. Develop that, have a great outlook, ambitious approach to looking at jobs. Prepare yourself, and I think the range is very, very wide. If I try and do a benchmark study, believe me, friends, I'm getting if I have to, even a CFO today, I can get a 25 lakhs and I can get a 3 crores. And which country you can find this kind of benchmark? The benchmark is of no meaning. Yeah, getting a guy at 25 lakhs, getting a guy at 35 lakhs, getting a guy at 65 lakhs, 75 lakhs, 90 lakhs is understandable, but I can get also up to 3 crores. So this is the whole variation, right? And you just have to believe in yourself that yes, I have to grow, I have to do good work, be with good organizations, keep learning, and growth will keep coming to you. As it is, we have spoken about our per capita income. You know what is our per capita income, right? It's pathetic. I mean, overall economy might be 5 trillion and so on and so forth, but per capita, if you divide it by number of people, how much it is? It's $1,800. Purchase parity $5,000. Where are we? So this has to go up. Of course, the flip side of it is cost. If your earnings go up, cost will also keep going up. So be it. You have to be on the upside of it. Yeah? And I'm sure there is a lot of upside in compensation. Generally speaking, the way the economy is, this year is already doomed. So it's a bad year. Outlook might change in terms of compensation now only by end of 2022, maybe end of 2021 or 2022. Though some organizations continue to give increments even this year. But by and large, people are not going to be generous about increments or increases. Yep. So that's the kind of end of the academic discussion on this subject and some questions that I had taken in the beginning. So I can take any other question that have come on the way.
So there are a few questions in the chat.
Chat, yeah.
Most,
Which one should I read all?
most of them. Can you please share the practices that you follow and your experience related to your own organization?
Sorry? Can you repeat, please?
Hello?
Yeah,
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
walk in your voice.
One question is, sir,
I can't
sir,
hear
is
you.
it audible now? Hello?
No.
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah. Yeah. In between I can hear you, but your voice is dropping.
Okay, sir. Sir, another question is from Someshri. Sir, she is asking you to please share any practices that you follow and in your organization.
So yes, we've looked at a 50p percentile. That's where we, as an approach, believe our compensation is. But again, a lot of time we swing back to what is your current compensation, and that's a practical issue that we keep getting stuck again and again at, because we are not getting enough support to all the time move somebody to P50. We've also looked at current compensation and try and give. So what is applicable in our company is a 10% standard increase on current, provided it is not going beyond P50. And we also go up to as high as 25%. What's important is evaluation criteria, and this compensation guys will only look at what is the compensation offered, but what's important for HR guys is to look at the evaluation criteria, whether you're getting the right talent at that cost or not. Yeah? So that's our philosophy. That's what I was trying to say. This is how we follow it.
Right, sir. So before we
Yeah.
yes, sir, let's take just one last question. It's from Miss Mary Jane.
Yes.
She's asking, sir, so how often can compensation be reviewed so as to retain talent and avoid high turnover?
So two things. One is, if we have an annual cycle, for example, do we have an annual cycle where we do this once a year, or do we have a anniversary cycle? First, you check that with her. Okay, anniversary cycle means that when an employee completes his 1 year, we look at his increment. But this is a very tedious job for HR, because whole year HR is occupied in looking at one case or the other, and they are never free from appraisals. Correct? So most organizations who are large will not look at an anniversary. They will look at a standard time in which this will happen. So it's a performance year. For example, April the year starts, March the year ends. Correct? So next from March to April, or maybe at best till June, the appraisal cycle should be over and increment should have been got decided. In September, they can do one more change, because in case we have made some mistakes in our assessment within in April, we have some correction window in September. That is where we should stop. We shouldn't alter this beyond this. We shouldn't all the time keep tinkering with compensation and appraisals and keep making changes. These are the two windows at best that you should have for compensation. One is the main performance planning and increment year, which is April, and after that in September, in case you have made few mistakes, which should not be more than 5% of the cases.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, so
pleasure.
much for accepting our request and invitation, and sparing your valuable time. I'm pretty sure
Thank
that
you. It's a pleasure always.
yes, sir, I'm pretty sure that the practical insights that we have derived from you is going to help us. Thank you very much, sir.
Pleasure. Thank you. All the best,
Thank you.
students. All the best. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.